Cái đó là bệnh đó, tụi con có biết không? Làm sao mà con có được hạnh phúc thật sự được? Hàng xóm với gia đình sẽ nghĩ làm sao đây? Those are the words my mother yelled at my sister the night she told her, I like girls. Roughly translated, she yelled, that's an illness, you know? It's not natural. How are you gonna get real happiness without a husband or a man? And my favorite, what will the neighbors think? You know, just the usual. Well, that night, my sister was sinking into the couch, her eyes red and her cheeks wet with tears. I was sitting on the other end of the room, on a recliner chair, watching, silently wishing that I would become that chair so the attention wouldn't get turned on me, because I knew it would. But I'm no Professor Slughorn, and it did. You, she yelled, pointing at me, are you also like this? Are you also sick? Oh, wait, please, even if you are, don't tell me. Try to change for my sake. I'd rather die than know my son, my only son, is not normal. Yeah, I did get my dramatic flares from her. But you know, despite the very personal, emotional toll this took, I'm not alone. But I used to feel like that. I used to feel alone for so long. When my cousins were playing with their Power Rangers and the action figures, I was on the other end of the room playing with my cooking set, serving food to my dolls and my teddy bears, under the judging eyes of my relatives. I mean, they're technically action figures too, Auntie. But at that moment, that night, aside from my sister and myself, I saw images of thousands of other kids sitting in that same couch, listening to the same talk, feeling the same anxiety. But we know this. We've heard of the struggle before. We've heard of the horrors of conversion therapy, the counts of violence that are still sadly going on across the country. But what I'm here to shed light on, this different kind of oppression, is more silent, is less visible, but is still solidly established, ingrained into the mindsets of entire cultures, my culture, and consequently, my parents as well. And while the discussion around LGBT life has gone larger day by day, a large part of that conversation is usually cut out, the picture of LGBT in the East. Now, the West is made to be the center of media attention, so oppression is easily called out. It's usually in legislation, in hate speech, in hate crimes and violence. And while these obvious forms exist in Asian queer communities as well, they more often experience oppression in silence, either behind closed doors or behind the isolation created by their own governments. But before I get into that, let's just take a few steps back and look at homophobia. Where does it come from? What causes this contemptuous mindset? As I gathered, there are three: history, hysteria, and psychology. Now first, history. Looking back all the way to the ancient civilizations, attitudes towards LGBT were a lot more open. I mean, it's funny how the past turned out to be more progressive in some ways than the present. But it's true. Take the Greeks and the Romans. Not only that they didn't condemn homosexuality, they wrote it into their own mythologies. And that shift in cultural tolerance towards homosexuality only started to take roots with the rise of Abrahamic religions, as difficult as that is to say. And then we have hysteria. As these civilizations grew and the urban areas started to develop, same-sex activities became more of a common thing, and so did the discussion around it. A fairly recent example of this, most of you will know, is the 1900s AIDS epidemic and its association with the LGBT community. Hatred and violence soared around the time AIDS rose as a public concern, and it thankfully subsided after science demystified the disease. But that is a classic case of homo-hysteria, this dangerous combination between a hyper-awareness of queer presence and homophobia. It's like thinking, oh my God, everyone here might be gay. What to do? Well, that is dangerous, as it perpetuates these stereotypes of masculinity and femininity by forcing and encouraging people to defensively prove that they are straight. And then we have psychology. Psychologists like Freud have long studied the mindsets of these haters, these homophobes, to entertain the possibility that that hatred is actually rooted from within. Well, some people, they use hatred as a defensive function to externalize repressed feelings and insecurities regarding their own self, their own sexuality. I mean, ironic, am I right? But then there are some people who are just victims to a lack of exposure to this issue, which can mystify the subject and incite fear. Well, that fear, that mystification, is what we're dealing with mostly in Asian countries. Well, that was just a general discussion of homophobia, but to better understand this specific image I'm trying to paint about Asia, let's just all take a tour around the continent. First, as a primer, let's start at a good location first. Thailand, the mecca of the Asian queer community, is renowned worldwide to be one of the most LGBT-friendly countries in the world, and it has a generally impressive queer visibility in the social media. In 2015, Thailand's Gender Equality Act added onto the country's rich history of LGBT protection. But even here, underneath that praiseworthy image, the country still faces significant challenges when it comes to cultural tolerance. This means 1/3 of the students who go to school that identify with the communities still experience violence. 1/4 experience sexual harassment, and 7% reports suicidal tendencies. And if this is the image of the best, can you imagine the rest? And also, family discrimination here also persists. Gay sons are sent into monkshood as a way to cure their homosexuality, similar to how conversion therapy is used. Now, not far from Thailand, Vietnam is also praised in a series of articles in the mid-2010s to be one of the most LGBTQ-friendly country in the world as well, standing only behind Taiwan and Thailand, in Asia, that is. Well, what these articles, again, didn't consider is that the country is friendly only because there's literally no legislation regarding to the issue. This means no bans, no prohibition, but also no protection. It's just simply too busy dealing with all the other injustices that happened there, all the remnants of its late liberation, to afford national attention to this issue. And this is quite a common image in Asia and in developing countries especially. Like Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia also experience the same thing. LGBT issues are swept aside, often as a second or third thought, next to poverty, disenfranchisement, political corruption. And while unfortunate, it is true that justice seems to be a luxury exclusive for the affluent. And then in Asia, we still have countries where opposition towards LGBT are stated outright, often based on religion. Religious states like Malaysia and Brunei are challenging, if not dangerous places for queer advancements regarding its laws. But all across Asia, however, no matter where the law stands, there's this over-encompassing air of suffocation around LGBT voices. Children are pressured by filial responsibilities to live the lifestyles that are deemed acceptable by the older generations. And this idea, this fixation with saving face, enhances the old school sneering disdain for LGBT lifestyle because it is deviant. Well, queer voices in Asia then are silenced, aside from all the other forms, by this invisible but constant force, the family. Well, does this mean that Asians are more homophobic or Asian families are more homophobic? Well, no, obviously, that's an outrageously general statement. Actually, one can say to a certain degree that homophobia in Asia is a colonial product. Now, I know it's a bold statement, but here's why. If you look at the ancient civilizations, again, like the Greeks and the Romans, attitudes in Asia towards homosexuality were also quite rosy. From the Sarat Santini, the Javanese version of the Kama Sutra, detailing relationships between men, to the Hindu emphasis on the fluidity of gender, to even the Taoist tradition that depicts some sexually ambiguous figures. History points out that the awareness of and the normalization of queer people traces back thousands of years. And that shift in cultural tolerance only started to occur in the age of exploration, when Europeans came to this side of the country with God, gold, and glory in mind, doctrinizing their ideas, their definition of a heterosexual traditional matrimony. And I'm not saying that this is it's the sole cause for this shift in cultural tolerance. I mean, it's not like all the ancient Asians were just like, yes, gays, and the colonizers just came and go, no way. But it is a starting factor. And the proof of this can be seen in historically colonized countries with late liberations. In the colonial era laws in India or Singapore that were written in the 1800s that are still to this day limiting gay rights. And I think it is not a coincidence that one of the most open-minded countries in Asia, Thailand, is one of the very few with a history free of colonizers. But what's different about Asia is that from this stem in colonialism, the mindset has been drilled deep down into the cultures by the very emphasis on obedience and maintaining familial integrity. The very thing that Asian families are most praised for, respect and structure, are the very things that are silencing queer voices because they are forced to fall in line. And think about this. Most of you grew up here in a country that glorifies free speech and individuality, where speaking your mind is encouraged, professing your truth is a right. But it's different in Asian countries. We are more part of the family than we are ourselves. So we have less freedom of voice because previous generations are the ones to determine the life of the next, thus creating and perpetuating these cycles of outdated traditions and beliefs, including homophobia. And yes, this caused progression to slow down. Singaporean LGBTQ activist Jean Zhang puts it, oppression in the East is more sophisticated because it is protected by entire cultural structures that are designed to keep the status quo. And on top of that, activism faces the multitudes of authoritarianism, political corruption, and just a general disregard for human rights that are rampant in some of these governments. Well, queer voices in Asia then, as you can see, are silenced from multiple directions, which makes their invisibility in the global discussion not surprising. But it is time this ends. So, what's the point of knowing all this? Well, I would say knowing is already an improvement. More people need to know so we can start including Asians into future discussions of LGBT rights. Share their stories. Do a little research on a foreign news channel, and you see for yourself what I'm talking about. Well, we are blessed to live here with the power of our voice, so use it. Give your voice to a cause, to someone who can't. Or better yet, you can travel, see the world. The more you see, the more empathy you will gain. Go to some global pride events, and you see for yourself this beautiful community I'm trying to speak up for. Or you can donate. In times of crisis, heroes arise. And there's no shortage of heroic efforts in Asia trying to push past their adversity and striving for change. Some good examples are the NQA-PIA, the National Queer Asian Pacific Islander Alliance, the APTN, the Asian Pacific Transgender Network, or even your local organizations here, like Glistens and the Travel Project. Any dollar towards the cause counts. Or hear this, you can share your story. Now, it's hard to understand, but the lives you live here and the freedom you hold can be powerful emblems of hope for outsiders. I mean, they were for me. When I was a kid, reading about celebrities in the US coming out and getting praised for their courage surprised me greatly, and it gave me hope. Now, with the whole world being just a few taps away, it is easier than ever to connect and share. But that's what my partner and I had in mind when we developed You. Young, Out, and Understanding, You is the website designed for people, young people especially, to tell their stories online with the choice of anonymity. The idea is that a quick post claiming who you are can not just only be a powerful message for yourself, but for readers elsewhere as well. I also included an informational page with data extracted from the UN about global policies around the world, LGBT protection in all the countries you can think of, and definitions and terms, fun history recaps, and even health statistics. most of the things you need, not all, most of the things you need to know to get queer and woke. Well, check it out. It's at ulgbtq.com. It is one of my proudest creations, something that I, in the fullness of my identity, I came up with. So, this is me. Now, colorful, happy, looking back at the growth I've experienced in the past 5 years, by just simply coming here, bursting out of my bubble, and experiencing this freedom, claiming my voice, has, again, surprised me and gave me hope. That kid right there could never have imagined that in 10 years' time, he would be wearing heels to prom, or wearing that crop top to our pride events, walking alongside these beautiful, colorful human beings. He probably wouldn't have gotten enough courage to admit his differences to himself yet, that he's actually playing with dolls and not action figures, let alone stand on the stage and give a TED Talk about it. That being said, progress is creeping forward. The world is trying to change. Even my own country, Vietnam, is trying. From little visibility here and there on the media, it is trying to reform. The undeniable fact is that we are heading towards a more colorful future, and that's what's driving humanity forward. My hope is that one day, the world, together as one, will be able to say, "Yas," together. Now come on, say with me, "Yas." Yeah, but as long as one of our brothers and sisters are left behind, we cannot get there. So I encourage you to extend your hands, not just to your immediate circle, but extend your hands to the far reaches of the planet, to the other side. Extend your hands to the silenced ones. Thank you.